What's something that took you way too long to realize? Growing up, I always thought my mom, Karen, had this invisible target painted on her back. I'd hear her talking on the phone in the evenings, pacing around the living room, her voice low but edged with frustration. "I can't believe what Sheila said today," she'd mutter. Or, "Janet was so rude again, right in front of everyone." Sometimes it was her coworkers at the office. Sometimes it was her friends. And more often than not, it was family. Her mother, her sisters-in-law, or her mother-in-law. As a kid, I never really understood it. I thought adults had these invisible social rules I wasn't allowed to know about, that people just had the power to be mean in ways I couldn't grasp. I remember lying in bed as she recounted the latest slight, hearing the names over and over, imagining each of them as villains in some kind of adult drama. My dad, Mark, would sit on the couch across from her, arms crossed, occasionally trying to reason with her, but most nights he'd just nod and mutter, "That's too bad, Karen." It wasn't that she was overtly angry or yelling at anyone. It was subtler than that. Her stories were full of these small moments, these tiny provocations, the snide tone someone used, the way someone glanced at her in a meeting. I remember her talking about her coworker Sheila, who supposedly rolled her eyes at her during a staff meeting, or her sister-in-law Janet, who had the nerve to comment on Karen's cooking at a family gathering. Every week there was a new slight, some injustice, some betrayal. I would sit at the dinner table, silently listening, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong in life that I couldn't see these attacks. I believed that the world really was full of people who just didn't like my mom, that she was somehow misunderstood, unfairly judged, and constantly at the mercy of everyone else's cruelty. Even in my teenage years, I carried that idea. I'd catch snippets of her conversations with friends, or hear her voice raised on the phone, and I'd silently marvel at her resilience, how she managed to survive in a world so consistently hostile to her. She seemed like a hero, standing up against these invisible aggressors. It wasn't until I moved out and spent more time in the world on my own that things started to click. I began working with people, dealing with friends, and navigating social situations without my mom filtering the lens. I noticed patterns in my own behavior, the way I could twist small inconveniences into epic stories in my head, how minor remarks could feel like personal attacks. I realized that maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't out to get Karen. Maybe she was the one shaping the narrative of constant conflict, the snide comments, the rude tones, the betrayals she always described. A lot of them seemed amplified, exaggerated, or possibly even imagined. It became clear that she had a knack for turning ordinary, mundane interactions into drama, and everyone else was just living their lives, oblivious to the storm she was perceiving around them. I started thinking back to family gatherings, to her coworkers she'd complained about, to friends she'd supposedly been slighted by. I remembered how some of them seemed genuinely bewildered by her anger, how casual comments I had overheard in passing never felt malicious to anyone but her. That's when it really hit me. The center of all the tension, the eye of the storm, had always been her. She was the common denominator in every tale of slight, every story of betrayal, every injustice. It was a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Relief because I no longer had to believe that the world was out to get my mom. Disappointment because it made me see how much of my childhood was spent wrapped up in her drama, absorbing it, believing it, and shaping my own worldview around it. Looking back now,